Today, today on the Still Rolling BJJ Podcast, I'm joined by Marcus Miller. Marcus has spent nearly 2 decades in law enforcement. He began his career with the Columbus Police Department in 2005, and now he is a sergeant with Perry Township. Outside of the badge, Marcus is a lifelong athlete and dedicated family man, married since 2005, and now training Jiu-Jitsu alongside his wife and his daughter at Team Chitwood. He first stepped into Jiu-Jitsu in the early 2010s, and then he stepped away when life kind of pulled him in other directions, and then he returned in 2019. Today, he's a brown belt under Professor Sean Chitwood at Team Chitwood. What makes Marcus's story especially powerful is how Jiu-Jitsu has helped him navigate the hardest parts of his career and life, including the weight of post-traumatic stress, and how the mats have become a place of healing, resilience, and family connection. Marcus, I'm grateful to have you here today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. And it's a huge honor for me. And take one of those quotes from one of my favorite BJJ fanatics, a guy that we all love and adhere in the sport of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So I would start our conversation with, when you think about the person you were before jiu-jitsu and who you are now, what do you think would be the sharpest contrast?
Well, law enforcement, I mean, you do 2 decades. And for me, it was starting my career in a pretty busy department like Columbus Police. And one thing that I found that you're pretty rigid, I'd say, is your friends are cops. You only talk to cops. You only spend time with cops. And when you're at work, all you do is talk about cop stuff. So, and the one thing that I would say that before jiu-jitsu, that was the reality of my life. And for me, outside of some high school friends that I grew up with that I still hung out with and communicated with, it was only people I really knew as cops. And honestly, your perspective on life, I'm sure it's somewhat similar. And like, if you just hang out with military guys, being in the military, it seems like the perspective of life is just through that telescopic lens of just law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're active duty in the Marine Corps, you're on a base, and it's like you live in Sparta, and that's all you know. I think I was in 29 Palms 5 years, and I didn't know a single civilian in town.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. So the only time that you interact with people that are not cops is when you're on calls. And being a young officer, I started out on third shift in the inner city areas, and I didn't even really see my wife. I got off work at 7 a.m. and a lot of times I was on overtime, and she went to work at 8 a.m. So by the time she got home, we might see each other for a few hours, and it's time for me to go back and interact with cops and bad guys. So
Yeah. What led you into getting into police work?
well, my dad retired from Dayton Police Department, so my dad was a police officer with Dayton Police Department, and I also have a family member that still serves as a sergeant for the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. Without reliving specifics of what you don't want to talk about, what does the cumulative stress look like in policing? I know that, I talk about this sometimes in the military, and, you have deployments, you go to war and those kinds of things, and you're in those sort of active environments where, people think of going to war like it's a gunfight every day, and it's not that. You have, if you are in combat, usually it's in short spurts. We say, 10 seconds or 10 minutes of horror surrounded by maybe 3 or 4 months of absolute sheer boredom. Then you come home. Police work is, in my opinion, without ever having been a police officer, but what I would observe is you guys are in that environment where you're always having to be vigilant, day in and day out, and then you go home, and then you got to go be a family guy. You're flipping a switch much faster than, if you come out of a war zone in the military. Usually they actually have kind of a decompression time. You might go to a different base, or you're in a different kind of a staging area before they even let you go home and interact with people like family.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that look like for you? And then once you kind of gotten into that, how has jujitsu kind of helped kind of process some things for you?
Absolutely. So the one thing that I found, and I got this from my pastor when my wife and I, when we got married, we had to do pastor counseling. And the one thing that stuck with me is he talked about hats, different hats. So he has a hat that's a dad hat. He has a hat that he's a husband hat. He has a hat also that he's a pastor hat. And he said the one thing that he took was when he got into his car, if he's leaving church or if he's going to from home to church, he put a different hat on. So it was kind of that reminder that you're not. We called him. His name is Pastor Pat, but we didn't. It was Pastor Pat didn't know he wasn't Pastor Pat when he was going home. He was Pat, or
Hmm.
he was dad, or husband. And sometimes what I found, especially early in my career, I got really I thought I was doing a good job of putting on my different hat, and when I've been pretty open, probably for the last 3.5 years, 4 years about PTSD, and honestly, I look at it more as PTS, and, sometimes you gotta have that label of the D, but, and it doesn't matter if you're a police officer or a firefighter or a nurse or even civilians. I mean, somebody that is having a traumatic crash or a traumatic event happening to them, that's post-traumatic stress. And one thing I found in law enforcement, for majority of us, because I'm sure it's the same way in the military. I've heard a lot of military guys speak that 99% of military guys are not actively in their career have been in a shooting. So it seemed like there was a big significant portion of the military, but the way they correlated it that I really liked is bears and ducks. I don't know if you ever heard that term, if you ever
Oh,
heard.
this would be a new one for
So
me.
yeah, so this one was a good one, and it's really stuck with me. Even when I trained police cadets, I talked to them about bears and ducks. And when I first was a cop, and when my first year was a pretty active year. I mean, we do 15 weeks field training in Columbus, and I would say at least through my first, and you go through 3 5 weeks, 3 5 week FTO periods where you go with a different FTO, different area of the city. You're grasping the entire what you're going to see as a Columbus police officer. And in my first 5 weeks, I responded to somebody who committed suicide by train. I went to we call them now mass shootings. To us, it was just a shooting then, but three victims, three fatal victims, and I learned, my FTO was doing his job right, and he was training me on things like death gargle and things that you're like, as a 22-year-old kid, you're like, you thought it was cool, then you're like, ooh, but um, they start building up. So I didn't have in my career that I would document it as that bear, which in law enforcement we look at it as being involved in a shooting, or losing a close partner or something like that. That's a bear. That's something to where you and fully anticipate that this is going to cause post traumatic stress. This is going to be where we
Yeah.
would get that PTSD from, and um, there's a lieutenant now with Columbus Police, and he trains for peer support and really discusses about three major events in his life. He was shot in the face. His wife got cancer, and he was involved in a wrong way driver that struck him on the freeway. And he would ask us as the trading audience, which one would you believe out of all three of those? He was shot in the face, he almost lost his wife because she has cancer, and he was in a crash with a wrong way driver that nearly killed him. And for us, we all as law enforcement go shooting. I mean, you were shot in the face. You literally were inches away from death. And he goes, it was the crash. And he
Hmm.
says, I for years or for a long period of time after that, I could not go on the freeway. And that really hit home for me because before that, when I thought about post traumatic stress, I was like, I can't have PTSD um, because I was never in a shooting. And I had, and him and I talk about it, but my dad even told me that he goes, whatever you do in your career, never tell anybody at your department that you're having any sort of distress. He says they'll take your gun, they'll take your badge, and you're no longer allowed to be a cop. And you, and when I start talking about the bears and the ducks are me showing up the me showing up to the gentleman that killed himself by a train. That's a little duck. Am I going to get killed by one duck? No. But then I show up to a triple homicide where three people are dead. Well, add that as another duck, or maybe even two ducks. I mean, that's the first time you witness somebody actually taking their last breaths.
Right.
Another incident that one of my first runs that I had was a fire lieutenant um, who was fatally killed in a motorcycle crash. It's another duck. And if you really think about it, you add more and more ducks, start getting 1,000 ducks. 1,000 ducks are a little bit more. You start looking a little bit differently at 1,000 ducks if they're coming at you pretty angrily, as much as you probably would that one bear. And I think that's the one
Yeah.
problem that we see in law enforcement and people. The one term that I've always heard too, and I've heard it from friends and I've heard it from family members is, well, this is what you signed up for. And I understand that to an extent, and I believe that law enforcement in general, up until I would say, whew, really not until I've noticed a difference in about 2016, 2017 when I left law enforcement. There was a change, and one of the areas that I really talk about is one of the situations that caused me to leave law enforcement was responding to a police officer that was killed. Um, I had a lot of ducks before that. Now I have a bear, and it starts weighing on you as a person. It impacts. For me, it was impacting sleep, night terrors. It was impacting my family relationship. It nearly caused a divorce. And I, for the last 4 years, have been going through counseling. And I'll tell you right now, and this is the reason why I love this podcast, is I've been counseling strictly for PTSD. I've been through basically like events that are made to be first responder specific PTSD events where you're there from Friday to Sunday and it's peer group and you're really trying to hone in. And that was really the first time that when I went to that seminar about 5 years ago, it was the first time that I really thought about, it's like, man, maybe just because I wasn't in a shooting doesn't mean that how hate to say effed up I was, but effed up, and they always use the term I'm okay. As law enforcement, I'm sure, and I've heard some military guys that is I'm okay. I mean, I'm okay, and then you start digging into what is okay. There's guys that I thought were badasses as cops. I mean, these dudes were if you could have it in that SWAT music we playing in the background, da na na. These are those guys, and to find out that
Yeah.
they go home and they have to drink a bottle. You know what I mean? They gotta drink before they go to bed. Or, I got a close friend who's still a police officer, and he says the only way his wife can wake him up is if she shakes his feet. She can't shake his shoulders, or he becomes violent. And these are guys that even to this day I look up to. I think these guys, when I think of badass, these guys are badass. And it was eye opening for me to hear this from guys that tell me their story after they leave the police department. And it got to a point to where I felt okay enough that for me, even still as a police officer, even as a sergeant, I have been diagnosed with PTSD before, but right now all I have is PTS. Just because I've been proactive at it. And one of the I would say my primary treatment has been jujitsu. And jujitsu has made a
Yeah.
huge, huge impact me as a person and my family. Just because I think why I've stuck around so much in jujitsu is because my whole family does it. My wife, my daughter. Um, you can see, and I know everybody. Hopefully, everybody can see this. This is me with an ugly Amish beard, and we're with Helsing Gracie, and there's my wife, and there's my daughter. So I'm glad I'm glad my whole family gets to do it. And the one thing that I'm also glad for is I found a woman that I love and that she can marry somebody as ugly as me and stay with me. She did not upgrade. So, but the one thing I will say is the jujitsu is it's something to where I began interacting with people that are not cops. Um, One of our best friends, I mean, smokes weed on a regular basis. I would never have thought that I would have hung out as a police officer with somebody who smokes weed on a regular basis. But the
That's
one
the
thing,
ongoing joke, right?
oh my
If you're
god,
looking, it's a lawyer, a doctor, a Walmart greeter, a cop, and a pothead all gathered together at the same time.
yeah, and that's the one thing that I love about it. And you know what? It's the pothead that I have some of the best conversations with, and to find out they are some of the most intelligent people I've met.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say something that is the impact there is I've gotten to a point to where even somebody who I would consider my best friend, he's tattooed from his head to his toes. And I'm sure you've rolled with Matt Jenkins, and he's a great guy. And you wouldn't think you put us side by side, you would look at him and be like, oh, he's been in prison, and he's definitely a cop. How are these two able to have a conversation and just we call it in law enforcement shoot the shit. So, and I apologize
Yeah.
if I hurt
No,
anybody's
this
feelings,
is
but
you
shoot
be
the
you.
shit
This
and
podcast is we'll call it PG-13, I guess. Language is fine. And if I get somebody who's extra spicy, then I'll warn people at the beginning of the episode. But uh, you can speak freely here.
perfect.
Yeah, and you know what? He's a tough son of a bitch too. Um,
One of the
Matt
toughest
is.
I you know what? Yeah. And you know what, Matt? And you know this. There's just guys that you train with, and I think you talked about it in your episode with Robin. It's just like every time you train with that person, you're like, this MF, I swear to God, I just can't get past this, or this. And
Hmm.
then you get past that, or that, and then you're like, okay, there's something else now. Now I have to defeat their whatever else they decide to introduce into the equation.
Well, that's you in
So
leg locks, right? You were so
yeah,
if you don't know Marcus, if you're somebody that's listening that's not in this circle, Marcus really put a lot of work into his Southside game before kind of anybody else at least in my little peer group, um, and he gets excited if you start trying to go to the South Side. I remember I went to the South Side on you once. You're like, "Are you sure about that?" And I was like, not anymore, but okay, here we go." And I was tapping. So yeah,
Matt,
you've got a thing that you do that's a challenge, and the best way to overcome it is to say, "Help me figure some of this out."
I remember, I want to tell this story where you got so mad at me. You were so
I
mad. I could tell it on your face. I'll be honest with you, Matt. That is the first time that I've rolled with somebody in a while. I'm like, I might have to keep my left hand up because I'm thinking a punch is about to get thrown. And you could just look on your face. I knew you were mad. You were like, just go back into it. I was like, he is so pissed off right now that and I forget what you did. You like tried to fall back on it. And the one thing about me in the Southside game is when somebody, especially just a straight ankle lock, you start going for it, and I already have my counter in place. And you were
yeah.
by the time you laid back, I mean, your ankle, I'm sure it felt like it was getting ready to get broken off. And you, oh, just that look on your face, I was like, "Ooh,
No,
I better chill
and
because Matt's bigger than me. He'll probably punch me pretty good."
I get fired up, and here's what happens, and I've worked on this, but what happens is when I am presented with getting submitted multiple times in the same exact way, and I either don't know how they're doing it or I don't have the first clue about how to defend it, I get angry. And it's, and in that case, yeah, that it did hurt. And so I was like, yeah, fuck it, let's go. Come on. And so yes, I was angry, and I don't, maybe my face, I don't have a good poker face sometimes. Um,
There was no poker. There was pure,
no.
I am about to we're about to fight. I was fully anticipating. I was like, he's probably getting ready. And I said, and I got to prepare myself. I'm like, all right, if he does, do not let him on top. He is not going to get on
Yeah.
top because once he gets on top, I don't care if you're a brown belt or not, this dude is going to do some pummeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all love.
Yeah.
That's all love. You know
I have,
what?
I have, I have never attacked somebody in anger in jujitsu. But I have had some frustrating moments where people have known that I'm annoyed, and I'm
Oh,
working
yeah.
on it. Um,
Yeah.
that's that anger management piece that jujitsu gives me. Um,
Yeah. But,
and
but I
I
do
do
have
have a
to,
good
you
control
do.
game.
And that's the one thing I would say about you for when you grapple is there is no way in hell I'm going to let you get side control on me. Even though you are down 30, 40 pounds and you look skinnier than I do right now. And I think you need to edit that down because um, I think that you looking skinnier than me, it hurts my ego. And I'm going to have to do something to remedy this the next time I see you. This ain't going to happen again, man.
It's the low angle camera that you're using with the buzz cut. It makes you look a little bit like a thumb, but it's okay.
Wow. I'll take a thumb. I'll take a thumb. I'll take a thumb.
Yeah. No, and I've been there too. And do they let you guys grow beards, or are you an anti
Yeah.
beard? Okay,
I
that
just
that
don't
that
look
just
good. I
covers
just don't
my
look
side.
good. I look like
Yeah,
Joe Dirt when I get a beard. And when I grew this beard, I had
yeah.
ringworm on my face that looked like basically from another planet. So ever since then, I just can't have beards. Not when I grapple. So
Well, that's the yeah. Um, yeah. No ringworm.
no.
No, and you look fine. So you mentioned that jujitsu's kind of been a big part of how you've dealt with stress, and that's I'm involved with something called the We Defy Foundation, which is focused on combat veterans with PTS, um, or not just PTS, but just disabled combat veterans,
Mhm.
where get these folks into jujitsu. Often it is things like PTS that gets them to that disability rating or that VA rating, and then we get them into jujitsu. We basically put them on a jujitsu scholarship for a year to get
Mhm.
them on the mats. Um, I don't know if there's anything similar like that for law enforcement. There should be. I know a lot of gyms either offer training for free or a discount um, for law enforcement. But um, what is it about jujitsu, in your opinion, that becomes kind of that cathartic or therapeutic thing where the outsider might look at it and say it's a bunch of grown-ups, well, and I guess there's kid classes, but it's a bunch of people trying to simulate murder.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's I think you said it best too with Robin's podcast that you did with him the amount of trust that we have for each other, even because we are simulating murder, that I find to be very interesting. It's that pothead that knows that you're a cop. And maybe 2 days ago, that pothead had an interaction with a cop, one of my fellow colleagues that might not be as hip to um, being cordial, which with other people, and he might have had a bad experience. But I got to ensure that pie is not going to choke me out or break my arm or whatever
Yeah.
have you because I'm cop. So there's a lot of trust there. But the one thing that I look at with jujitsu and how it really made an impact, um, especially with dealing with stress, is what I found is, especially as a police officer, I have a lot of stuff going on in my shift. It could be just a crash. It could be nobody calls the police to say, "Boy, officer, I'm having the best day of my life. I had to just share that with you." It's always you're always interacting with somebody who is having their worst day in their life. That's
Right.
every day. Every day for me, I have to interact with humans that are having the worst day of their life, and that is that again, we talked about ducks, we talked about bears. Another way to put at it is you can have another way is I've heard people putting rocks in their book bag. You have a book bag that's empty and you put a rock in there. It's pretty light, maybe one or two rocks, but you put 5,000 rocks in there. That becomes pretty heavy pretty quickly, and that's what usually gets cops. And what I love about jujitsu is if I go into class and I bump fists with Matt Montgomery and I'm thinking about that crash. Matt Montgomery's gonna put it on to me. It jujitsu is that one place to where it doesn't matter if it's work stress, home stress, financial stress. It tends to, at least for that hour or that hour and a half, it tends to go away. I have for years before jujitsu, I have not been able to find anything to where it took that it took it away. You always had whatever was bothering you in the back of your mind was always there. If you're watching a movie, and I think this is why addiction becomes a big issue in first responders and military guys is they never get the relief. But there was a point to where I'm only 5'10", and I ballooned up to 265 pounds when I was 28. And my doctor says you're about to be pre-diabetic, have heart issues, and we got to put you on blood pressure medicine. I was like, how about I just lose weight? So
Yeah.
which really made that impact. But my coping mechanism was food. So, and I think as cops, we try to find what that coping mechanism is or that way to um, eliminate that stress in your life. And I found that it's jujitsu. Um,
Yeah.
I, I jujitsu is a gentle art, and everybody's like, "You're trying to kill each other." Well, I guess if you look at it that way, but it's the only time that I can bump fist with somebody who's not a cop. And if it's that 5-minute rule, anything that I had stressing me out is gone, at least for that 5 minutes or for the class, for that entire class. And, you get better at it and better at it and better at it. And you really look forward to that class or that role. And like I said, it doesn't have to be work stress. It could be just family stress. It can be the stress of your kid going to college or whatever have you. This for a period of time without having to use drugs, alcohol, food, or I hate to say it for some people, pornography or something like that. You have that stress relief that is beneficial to you. And one big one for me is having my family doing it and being able to spend time with them because I know lot of gu- guys and gals that do jujitsu, they don't do it with their family. And sometimes if you're really addicted to jujitsu, you
Yeah.
might spend a lot of your free time there. But I get the benefit of being able to do it with my family.
Yeah. No, and that
So
I think it's amazing that you guys both train. It's my wife jujitsu is not her thing. And as much as I'd love it if it was, it just isn't. I'm okay with that. She also understands that I'm going to go train, but I also see, you know, you in there and I see a couple other couples that, both train. Um, it's fun to watch because you guys are both in an environment where you're both getting all these great things that jiu-jitsu provides, and you're getting to see each other grow and do it that way. Um, as far as the kind of taking your mind off of things, you're talking about it kind of actually reminded me about a non-jiu-jitsu thing. When I was in boot camp, we were able to call home on Easter Sunday, and I called home and I got the news that a grandparent of mine had died. And so I fell back into formation. I was very sad about it, and my drill instructor could see that I, gotten some news that wasn't good. And so he came over, asked what happened. I said, my grandmother died. And so what he did is he immediately took me to the pit, and he worked the dog shit out of me for about half an hour. Just probably the worst, in boot camp when they make you do all the extra physical exercise, the push-ups and whatnot. It's called IT, or incentive training. Um, I didn't understand what the hell was going on. Didn't know why I was being punished in that moment, but for that amount of time while I was getting thrashed, my mind kind of went off of family stuff, and it became focused on this thrashing that I was receiving. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And you had to
yeah,
forget, you had to forget about it or you're going to get
I,
thrashed even worse.
and that's exactly it. That's 100%. So, what in the moment felt like he was punishing me, and honestly, he probably did exactly what I needed at the time, because I had to get some emotion or anger or whatever out in that moment, and that was in the form of that exercise. So, um, yeah, drill instructor
Absolutely.
Sergeant Minor, if you're running around out there somewhere, thanks. Um, it's only been 25 years. Um, shit, 27. I'm old. Um, anyway, um, so you got into jiu-jitsu then for fitness. Is that what I'm gathering, or was it something where you said I gotta, you know, become a better fighter, better to able to defend myself, or what was it?
Yeah. I'd say the first time was, and the one thing that because I've said it before, especially the more rank I get into, is I wish I would have stuck with it when I started in about 2010 because I would be a black belt by now. But I think jujitsu has its purpose and it has its journey, and sometimes we for family reasons and when we have full times and jobs and that jujitsu is not our full time job or our full time passion, we take breaks, and my family life, my work life did not allow me to stick with it. But the first time it was, I'm not a small guy, and I should handle a smaller person pretty easily. And you get somebody that you're putting them to the ground, they're getting back up. You're like, what's going on? And back then a lot of the cops, and there wasn't many of them. There was, I think, the biggest thing that I heard in the police academy in 2005 was wrestlers. And I wrestled, a few years in grade school and all that. So wrestlers. So we hear about wrestlers. Okay, wrestlers should be able to keep some of the ground. But then keep hearing about this jujitsu thing. I was like jujitsu. What's that? So and then I started with a gym and I had some guys that were Columbus cops that were there too, and um, some of them went to Grove City because Grove City was now being identified as that where cops go to train jujitsu. And I lived in Delaware, Ohio. I'm like, I am not driving from Delaware, Ohio, to Grove City 3 days a week on 2 hours of sleep and training jujitsu, so I stopped. So what brought me into back into it the second time was not even for fitness. I was an instructor at a police academy. I was in the hitman suit, and there was a blue belt, Seth. Um, Thank you, Seth. There was a blue belt from Grove City, and just about everybody in the class, I'm wiping the floor with them. I boxed in college. I have experience in other martial arts growing up as a kid, and I've never had an issue. Seth was about 180 pounds. goofy as hell, a great kid, great office, a great deputy, great man. He wiped the floor with me. I have the Hitman suit on, and that's the first time I had to take a Tim Tebow knee and just sit there because I got worked over, man. I've never had anybody work me over like that before,
Yeah.
and he was high-fiving his friends, and he didn't and there was a few other guys that were just white belts at Grove City, and they're all having the same thing. They're like, "We're beating the crap out of this guy." I'm like,
Yeah.
This ain't gonna happen
Yeah.
again."
Not again.
And that's my mindset. You're somebody who's the same way. That was my mindset. I was like, "I'm not gonna get my ass kicked like that again." So I found the closest gym, you know, training at Chitwood that, he has, name recognition in law enforcement. He's been in law enforcement for 30 plus years, and he has the recognition in, the jiu-jitsu communities. And with it being, close to our home, I'm like, I'm going to, Chitwood. And my first class, I got paired up with this purple belt. He looked like when he first came in, he was that pothead. I don't even think he's still there anymore, but he was that kind of like pothead, scraggly beard. And when I saw him walk through the door, he had this Crocodile Dundee hat on, and I didn't know what a daggum purple belt was. And we got to rolling, and I quickly learned what a purple belt was, and
Yeah.
I got my ass kicked. And I got addicted to it after that. This is one of those one things that we do, I guess, in our lives that we're saying that I loved it. I'll tell it to him now, but our former so I was in jujitsu for several months, and when November came around, we're talking about November of 19. And there's a major world event that's about to come around, and
Yeah.
in law enforcement, and we keep hearing about this cold that's over in China, and then everybody was like, it's China. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to worry about anything. So we're like, okay, we're cool. We're cool. Um, by the time March of 2020, my wife started, my daughter started, my whole family's involved in it because they see how much great time I'm having, how much better I'm getting at it, and um, this cold, call it, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it or not, but this
We're not
CV-19.
saying, yeah, who knows?
Okay,
Yeah.
it showed up and it shut the world down,
Yeah.
and my mental health relief got taken away. And I think this is one of the big things that really happened to us a lot. And before it got taken away, I got a phone call from my chief at the time. Hey, chief, how's it going? And he goes, "Hey, are you still doing that? I think they call it jujitsu thing." I was like, "Yeah, I do that. 2, 3 times a week." Got read the riot act. When I said the riot act, I got called every name in the book except the best officer in the world. But I was called every name in the book, and I was told, "You're not allowed to do that anymore." And I'm like, "Hold on, excuse me?" And he said, "You're not allowed to do that anymore. You could possibly kill somebody or hurt somebody if you got sick." So that was the first time in my life that I was doing something productive and something that was helping me a lot, and I was told that I can't do it anymore. Um,
Wow.
that fueled my and we it's something I would talk to him to this day. Even my current chief, who was a lieutenant at the time, he called me back and he said, "I apologize for that conversation." Um, ever since then, it's I know, and I'm not going to go on any tangents or anything, but I'm really big. I'm tattooed American flag and all that stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm a big on our rights, and I felt like one of my major right was getting taken away, and ever since then I've been pedal to the metal jujitsu, and um, I'll tell them to this day that one conversation is probably one of the biggest reasons I stuck with jujitsu. The reason why, even after that, during lockdowns of that, I started training every week. I would drive an hour an hour away to go train with Sean Chitwood one-on-one. Paid a
Yeah.
lot of money to do it just because I needed that mental health relief. I needed it. I mean, Matt, I'm sure you're the same way, but a lot of people get into jujitsu and they're like, I just want to be a fighter. I want to be the best in MMA. They see themselves as Conor McGregor. They see him as, you can go with Gordon Ryan or one of those guys. They're like, I want to be the next that guy. For me, it was that hour and a half. It was that time to where I'm bettering myself and I needed it. And I paid a lot of money to meet with Sean and get my one on one because that's the one thing I told Chief. I said, hey, I'm not in the class setting. I'm one on one with somebody who is not ill. Can I train? And he allowed it. So
Yeah. Oh, you don't want me to train? Good. I'm just gonna train harder.
yeah, and that's what it really became for me was, you told me I can't do something that's proactive, so I can sit at my house, I could drink, I could sit at my house and, I knew pretty close people in my life that they were in law enforcement, they were popping pills. It's okay if I pop the pill. It's okay if I drank, but I'm doing something that's productive, and you're telling me I'm not allowed to do it because
Yeah.
of proximity. And again, I fully get where I think I as a supervisor now, I understand he had to look out for the entire police department and, his concern for him, his concern for, his just everybody he's around. I get it now, but then I'm like, I'm like, yeah, this is the first time in my life that I was told that you can't do something, especially when it's a legal thing that thousands of people do and you're not allowed to do it. So that made a big impact on me.
Well, I think probably, I mean, obviously the guy doesn't train. Nobody that trains would have probably attacked it that way. Um, and so people that don't train don't have any idea the kind of benefits that you get from training. Our why and why we train for the most part. And yes, there are guys that are just there to go be the next, Dan Henderson or Conor McGregor, right? Um, but that's like the outlier. 90% of us are either regular dudes or law enforcement or military, but a lot of and I shouldn't even say dudes and ladies that are training for all the other reasons that we do jujitsu. Um, and the mental benefits, the health, the physical benefits. I think the mental benefits for me are much greater than the physical benefits.
Yeah,
Um, and so my why and why I started training versus my why and why I train today are two completely, totally separate things. Um, and obviously, 20 years ago I was 25. And so in my brain, I still thought I could fight. And,
yeah,
my 45-year-old brain knows for a fact that, that's not ever going to be me. Um,
yeah. And that
so
was a big thing, Matt, for me is I started out when I first started jujitsu, and it went really quick for me. So when we talk about evolution of what jujitsu becomes for you as a person, for me it was like I'm not going to have another cadet blue belt going to whoop my ass. That was the reason I started it. A reason that took me past that to stay with it was all right, next step was I'm not gonna have some Crocodile Dundee looking purple belt gonna keep kick my ass on a routine basis. And then it evolved into I'm not gonna have somebody who is my boss tell me I can't do something in my private life, um, even though there's a lot of benefits. And then it evolves from there. It evolved from, once we started coming back as a group, collectively as a group, it was more about, I got into the competition style and really why that's why I picked up Southside. I got into competitions and did several competitions, and then I'm to the point now, and it really hit hard for me last year when I went to first shift. Is I don't have the energy to keep up with that competition speed anymore. I'm getting in my 40s now. I'm 41, and it seemed I don't know what it is, but this since I got and Greg Francos, and I know you talked about Greg with Phil. Um,
yeah,
he gave me some advice. He goes, as a brown belt, you'll never be not broken is the best way of putting it. So, and I kind of chuckled at it and be like, oh, he's just the, you know, dusty, crusty old brown now getting his black belt. But I
And
love that man
Kratos.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, love that man to death. And, you know, since I've gotten my brown belt, man, it's like, you know, my back hurts. You know, things like, cause I do a lot of inversions and, leg attacks and that there's just things that I don't know why it was like 6 months ago, it didn't hurt. Now it's like, freak, my back can't stop hurting or this. And it's evolved to now to where I really am not seeing myself in being in competitions. It's more of the mental health and the physical health. You know, my daughter now, today was her first day of high school. And for me, it's, you know, when I was a younger police, this is one of the big things. When I was a younger police officer, when my daughter was first born, probably for the first 5 years, she never really met me as much as you would want to be. I was, my wife had to take a leave of absence from work when my daughter was an infant, and I had to pick up more work. So I'm working nights. I get about 2 or 3 hours of sleep. I go work overtime or special duty, and then now I got get a few more hours of sleep, maybe see my family for 30 minutes, an hour, and then go back to work. And the one thing that I've been over the last, I would say, few years, especially the last like 3 years, and then since my daughter's gotten into competitions and that, I've been more into the idea of living living by watching her excel and do well in things that she wants to do. She's told me you know, and last year when we went on vacation, we went to Hawaii, and one of the big things that you know, my every generation of my family, I can trace somebody on my generation back to the Civil War, has been in the military in every generation from the current wars
Yeah.
that we've dealt with to the Civil War. And the biggest thing we had to go to was Pearl Harbor. And up until this point, my daughters actually had interest in become going to the Marine Corps. And my wife, don't tell my wife that. My wife was like, "You are not going to the Marine Corps," and she goes, "Marcus, tell her." I was like, "Jen, I gotta say, if Elizabeth wants to go to the Marine Corps, I gotta support it." So, and that's the only thing I've been to. But back to
Where does that
Hawaii,
motivation come from?
you know, her
Or we'll get
grandfather.
into that after Hawaii, but
Okay, but in Hawaii, we went to Pearl Harbor, and her as a teenager, you know, the biggest thing I told her, I said, "Your cell phone is being turned off, and you're going to be given the utmost respect while we're here." So you're going to be completely attentive. If a gentleman that is a volunteer asks you a question, or if you go up to that person, it's always with "Sir, ma'am." You give the ultimate respect. Um, these people earned it, and they gave the ultimate sacrifice so you can be where you're at today. And she took that to heart. So we do Pearl Harbor, and you know, I'm big enough to admit it. We looked at the wall, and we were listening to one of the volunteers talk about, well, there's a set of triplets up here, set of twins up here. These guys are brothers. There's so much there and so much sacrifice. It's not just an individual sacrifice, but generations were lost.
yeah.
Just at Pearl Harbor. We're not talking about World War II. We're talking about Pearl Harbor. Generations of a family was lost to ensure that we have the ultimate sacrifice. And you know, there wasn't a dry eye after you spend time there. And you know, there were some kids there. They were on their phone. They were joking and laughing. And to me, I mean, it's not my kids, so it's not my place. But my daughter, you know, biggest thing I tell my daughter is, you're not when you're in something like this, you never act like that. And she took that to heart. And once we got done with Pearl Harbor, she goes, "Dad, you know what? I want to do. I really would like to try to go to the Naval Academy." And I've always been really big on, if that's what you want to do, then I want you to work for it. There's enough people I work around and politicians that I've had a chance to actually make contact with, to where if I need somebody to sign off on it. But I said, if this is your goal, 10-year goal. If it is Naval Academy, you know what? Be honest with you, Matt. If she, when 18 comes around, she goes, "Man, Naval Academy seems tough, but I'm just going to enlist. I want to go through that way." I don't care if it's the Marine Corps, the Air Force. She is not going to the Space Force, though. That is not the real military. But if she wants to go to the military, I don't care what branch it is. I will support her 100%. And one of my goals that I would like to see is if she does go to Annapolis, being able to go spend time in Annapolis and watch my daughter grow into hopefully who is going to serve their country.
I tell you what, that's so I'm curious how she locked in on the Marine Corps, but you know, having been enlisted and kind of being a little older and wiser, if she can get into that Naval Academy and if that's where she wants to go, man, I hope I really truly hope she can do it. The Marine Corps, just like any other branch of service, is going to be what you make of it. Um, you know, the people that want to be Marines, you know, there's sometimes people accidentally end up in the Marine Corps, right? They don't know what they're getting themselves into, and you know they just sort of almost flip a coin between some branches and sign on some dotted line somewhere. And then you have others that identify the Marine Corps early off or early on. I know that when I joined the military, I can still remember I was at a family dinner with my grandparents and my parents, and I said, "I'm joining the military." And my grandmother's like, "Oh, you're going to the Air Force Academy." We're from Colorado, so Air Force Academy was close, you know, down in Colorado Springs. And I said, "No, no, I'm not going to the Air Force Academy. I'm going to enlist." And they're like, "Oh my God, oh, you're kidding." You know, like, okay, you're going into the Air Force, right? And I said, "No, I'm joining the Marine Corps." And they're like, "Oh my God." Like the Marine Corps, oh, are you serious? Like it was devastating. You know, to my grandmother, you know, mothers of America, you know,
Yeah,
they don't want their boys to um and then so I enlisted early. I graduated high school early, and you know, my parents had to sign off for me to go to boot camp when I was still 17 years old. And
nice.
talking to them later, because they weren't thrilled about the Marine Corps idea. I guess maybe more my mom wasn't thrilled about it. My dad kind of, but what they said is you know, I was headstrong enough that they could either embrace the decision that I was making, that I was going to go do anyway and sign off, or they
Yeah,
could resist it, and then I would just wait till I was 18 and go anyway.
yeah,
Um, and so you know, the Marine Corps, while I have had some of the most difficult times of my life, it's also been some of the best parts of my life that I remember the best, and think of fondly, and the lifelong friendships that I made in the Marine Corps, you can't replace. I would say jujitsu friends are the most similar to what I had in the military. Um, so hats off to her. I hope that, you know, whatever path that she chooses, that she'll knock it out of the park. It sounds like she's got good head on her shoulders.
yeah, she
So,
does. So,
well, not to just totally shift gears, what would you say? Why do you think that there are police that don't train?
you know, I think we get cops are really regimented, scheduled, and I'm sure a lot of people are that way. But you know, I being a supervisor and doing a lot of admin stuff, and you know, there's been a lot of things we've introduced new to cops over the last several years, and that new item could be very minuscule to time of their day. We're talking maybe it might take up 5 minutes of their day, and you thought you were taking their entire law enforcement existence away. And I think
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I kind of look at is we get such stuck in a particular, and there's a lot of cops that I don't really see, and we all know Johnny Kim. Johnny Kim's one of those ones to where he's a full time police officer, and he is somebody who's a black belt, which to me it seems really rare. especially if you're not going to a gym that's like I think Grove City Jiu-Jitsu, and I apologize if, by naming names and that for other gyms because
Come on,
I,
Dave
I
Frank.
real
I'd love to get Dave on the podcast.
I I think that their culture that they have introduced to first responders in the law enforcement community in Grove City is phenomenal. Gives as much as I think a lot of law enforcement the they love being around other cops. I was kind of the opposite of where when I was having issues with post traumatic stress, I tried to not interact as much because I didn't want to relive some of the issues or hear some of the same stories. But there are still good cops to where sometimes it's better to be around like minds. A little opposite
Mhm.
of what I how I kind of took it, and I think that Grove City has done a phenomenal job of building a jiu-jitsu gym and a culture down there that allows it. But it to me, outside where I was going with that is, I find very tough to find a police officer that goes from white belt to black belt outside a culture like that. And I look at like somebody like Johnny Kim. There's been other officers that I know in Team Chitwood to where great cops, great at jujitsu, but they don't make it to the end. And a lot of times we look at it's one thing that I find for like law enforcement. It's so easy, especially in larger cities, and that to overtime. Um, do you want to spend
Yeah.
3 hours of getting ready to go to jujitsu, hour and a half at jujitsu, an hour and a half afterwards, getting ready for if you have to go to work or spend time with family? I find that that's a really they really look at that and saying, well, that's 3 hours of my day. I could have been at overtime making 100 something dollars an hour. So I think that's where
Yeah.
that goes into that is uh, the best way of saying it, life happens for a lot of
Yeah.
cops, and sometimes the one thing that I worry about for myself because I've done it before is it doesn't matter how I feel injury wise in that I feel like I at least have to make it to class because so I'm staying on a schedule because if I didn't at least show up to class, then almost like what Phil talked about, I think Phil really hit it home of how much it's really impacting him right now because of his injury. And
Yeah.
to me, I almost would want the bad part for me is I almost want to at least try to train something. I mean, put me in a boot, train something. I don't have to roll, but I need that consistency and a lot of times for cops, it's the consistency of they go to work, they go to court, they go home, and they go into rotation. And sometimes we just get caught up in that rotation, and that's the reason why they don't train. And you know, there's other cops too. They rely on, I'd say a lot of cops they rely on things like tasers and that. I watch way too many videos of I saw one recently. There was 3 cops versus 1 guy, and this guy doesn't look like he's John Wick, and he punches every one of those cops in the mouth. Um, uh, right now and then being a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, you're not punching me in the mouth. You may get that one punch off, but I promise you one thing is you are gonna regret that punch at least for the next 6 to 10 months that you're gonna be healing. And I don't think that the current culture in law enforcement, especially when I look at a county like Franklin County, to where a lot of cops are being criminally charged for their actions in that. So they almost look at interacting to where you have to use force or some level of force as a negative. And
Yeah.
maybe that's a reason why they don't start jujitsu. But to me, when I look at jujitsu, ever since, especially being a brown belt, I can take control of somebody without hurting them, without throwing a punch, without using my taser, without using pepper spray, without using my gun, and I feel perfectly confident that 99.99% of the world I can put in handcuffs without them or I getting injured.
And
And
because obviously the research is out there at this point, right? We know that jujitsu can put you in that position.
absolutely,
Um, yeah.
just think about our first day. I mean, you were Um, you have a sports background. I have a sports background. You're a big guy. I'm a big guy. 180-pound purple belt. I look at this guy I'm like, you're 180 pounds. What are you going to do to me? He showed me what he's going to do to me. Um, that could be a 180-pound cop versus a 260-pound suspect. I mean, and I was never put in a position where I was going to get hurt by that purple belt. I learned really quickly that the best way you can get out of something in jiu-jitsu is little tap, little tap on the
Yep.
on your
That's
your opponent or on the mat.
that's a I brought in a buddy of mine who he was a very good player at Ohio State and spent some short time in the NFL, uh, offensive lineman. I'm not going to put his
Big
name
guy
on
too.
here. Huge. He's
Oh my
315
god,
pounds and
I was
he was
terrified.
right. But we were able to, and he loved every minute of it. By the way,
Yeah,
he loved the fact that guys 100 pounds lighter were able to, wrangle him in, keep him down, um, you know, relatively easy. I mean, I did get on his back once and he just stood up with like I was a backpack, but, I just, I was also kind of not putting hooks in. I wasn't trying to destroy the
yeah,
guy on his first day,
yeah.
but, it's great evidence that, even the largest, strongest humans, if you have a reasonable amount of training, you can at least keep them on the ground and control them.
Percent. Yeah, and get them
And
into a tough.
I'm not trying to criticize police officers. I've never been in your shoes. I just it's so obvious to me that, man, if you just, you don't have to be a black belt. If you
No,
just get at least through a blue belt, I think every police officer should be required to be like at least a blue belt level. And if
yeah,
that means I got
I
to pay more taxes, pass whatever, reforms in training and shifts and everything else, I would do it, but I'm not in charge. Uh,
the one thing,
I
Matt,
would
that
let
I
every police officer coming into
yeah,
jujitsu because I think it makes them safer
and the one thing
for everybody.
that uh oh, absolutely, I agree. And the requirement in Ohio is you pass defensive tactics in the academy. And there are now departments like Columbus, Franklin County, larger agencies. They're great about doing some level of defensive tactics every year. Smaller agencies, the only time, a lot of times they do defensive tactics is that defensive tactics they get in the police academy.
Yeah.
You put 25 years on as a crop, um, and there's guys that I work with, great people, but they have not had to get a hands-on fight with somebody, and they have 15 years of law enforcement experience. So that lack of knowing what to do in that situation, their first fight might be that one fight. I'm that 260-pound drunk who wants to go, and you're trying to recall training you got 15, 16 years ago, and use that. And that's where we see a lot of the videos online that are really bad.
Well,
Um,
that's the same thing in the military. I don't want to shatter any myths for anybody that might be listening and you've only seen Marines in movies and on commercials. A lot of Marines running out there that can't fight. Depending on MOS, they went through boot camp. They learned some basic MIC-MAP, which back in the day, but when I first got in, it was even worse. It was called line training. It was total bullshit. We used to joke around somebody would try to go use it out in town to get their ass kicked. But then you don't do a lot of that after because you have your full job. You're maintaining vehicles and equipment and, all this other crap. And if you're not combat arms, probably you're not doing much more hand-to-hand training. So guess what? You have a lot of jarheads running around, living on this myth that people have that you have all these badass Marines out there. And granted, I love the Marine Corps. We are world's finest fighting force. But as far as actual fist fights and those kinds of things, there's a lot of Marines running around that I know for a fact can't fight. And
and,
it's the
and
same, I'm sure, law enforcement,
and to make it worse, just put a box of crayons in front of a Marines, and that box of crayons.
right? It's gonna come
Don't
up
hit me,
missing.
Matt. Next time you see me.
No, no, I
uh,
won't.
uh, uh, but it's a very good point to put, and that's why I Chief Belford. I'm sure you've trained with Chief Belford, but he offers for his department. It, they offer to pay, and nobody's taken up him up on that offer.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those to where it's you would think that events, especially from 2020, that officers be like, man, it's just maybe we could have done something better. Maybe I can do something to better myself or even leadership to look at. Maybe we can do something to better our department so that doesn't happen to us.
Well,
Because
what I was talking to another police officer about this, and he said, he thinks the primary reason is that to a police officer, it's more work, mandatory training. You're being
yeah,
voluntold to do something,
yeah,
and therefore you become resistant to that because you're already you have all these other responsibilities due to
hmm
work.
yeah,
And so I get it. I just, just like anything else in the world, you wish it was perfect. But
yeah. And, the one thing that's really helped me out to know that how well jujitsu is, especially in law enforcement, is when I trained police academies, I was the defensive tactics instructor. Um, Last year, I mean, 40. I'm a 40-year-old male, and I have 20-year-old kids, and I have them start on my back, and it does not take long to get them off my back. And I start with me on their back, and they realize pretty quickly, like, this 40-year-old man is putting it to me. And I'm this fit college
yeah,
kid that's been ready to go into this job. And even when now that at that point in time, I was a purple belt with the hitman suit on. And, I use a little bit of jujitsu on some of those guys because honestly, I was using it to, all right, let's see how well this stuff really works against somebody who doesn't know grappling arts
absolutely.
or martial arts. And I was wiping the floor. It came to the point where one of the instructors would be like, "You gotta be nicer to these guys so they can pass." Oh, but there was like police cadets. I mean, they they would go to a taser because they see the scary guy who knows jiu-jitsu. They know me because of my pretty ears and everything. Hey, this guy knows jiu-jitsu. I'm not going to tangle with him. So they grab their tasers, and before they know it, I'm grabbing their tasers out of their hands and be like, "You don't need this anymore." Throw it behind me, and it's like it's time to fight.
Yeah.
Let's fight. And a lot of them don't know, and there's a lot, Matt. There's a lot of police cadets I've met that they don't know how to ball their fist up. We're talking about 22-year
Yeah.
old men that they're doing one of these with their fist, and I'm like, that's you're gonna break your thumb, bub. These are, and it wasn't just one person. These are actual um, a, a lot of people, and one of the questions that I always ask um, before we start defensive tactics and in the whole class, who's been in a fight? And most
Yeah.
people would be like, "Oh, you and I, I was born in '84. You were born in probably '75 or something like that." Or
Born in 80.
it's okay. So we're born in '80.
I'm not that
So,
old. Right.
but we grew up, we fought, we fought in the neighborhood and everything, and it's something that it just is what it is. And a lot this generation now, they don't have that, or this generation I saw when I first became a cop. I grew up in an inner city area where we would get into a fist fight, but weapons were never introduced. When first became a cop, the one thing I noticed is um, somebody doesn't think they're going to win the fight, so they introduce weapons, and now we're dealing with a homicide versus somebody lost a fight between two, a gentleman's agreement, basically.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, the world's a little different. I mean,
Absolutely.
I don't, I was in a bunch of fights growing up.
Oh my
I got
god.
picked on actually quite a bit, you know. Um, all right. So I'll just ask a last question. If you have officers that are curious but hesitant about coming and training, what would the first 30 days look like if you design a program for them? What would you tell them?
The first 30 days, I think number one, you have to have that humbling experience. I think if an officer goes into a jiu-jitsu gym and you look at somebody that's a purple belt, a brown belt, or a black belt, and this officer's handling them, I don't think that they're going to really look at jujitsu and go, "Oh, this is important." I think you need that humbling experience, and I think for law enforcement, they really need that humbling experience. That just because you're Officer Smith and you've been able to handle yourself there, just realize there are people out there if they want to flip that switch and own you, they can own you. But I think after that initial humbling experience, it's getting them to come back and realize the benefits of this. Like I said, I've had some encounters, especially as a purple belt or even some as a brown belt, to where um, when I'm handling somebody, it's like I'm handling a child at that point. It's so easy, just because of the experience. Um, I think sometimes, and I'm sure you too, I've noticed that there's a lot of people now that they get caught up in YouTube, TikTok, social media, and they want to go, "Hey, I want to know this kick-ass move to where you do 3 backflips into a front roll and you grab the leg, and then now you're into this really wicked heel hook that's just going to submit everybody, including Gordon Ryan." And you got to understand that's not reality. I think if I was going to focus 30 days, basics, um, what's guard, what's side control, what's having your back taken feel like, what a shoulder mount, somebody that's really a really good shoulder mount player. Or I know Robin's really known for his triangles, from my understanding, how he's just wicked good at triangles and that. Knowing somebody that's that good at a position like that and go, oh, and then be able to say, okay, if you get into this situation, this is how you can get out. Or if you're in side control, this is how you can maybe recover guard. I think
Yeah.
for me, the first 30 days, and honestly, the first year should be nothing more than basics. I wish I would have done that. I really at one point I got to know how to do this upside down arm bar my first year. But to me, I think it didn't hinder my progress, but it put roadblocks there because in the reality, as a cop, what you're going to utilize for law enforcement self defense is going to be basics. You're not going to be looking at rear naked chokes. You're not going to be looking at that unless it's life or death situations. But knowing how to control somebody if you get mount, how you're able to transition mount into taking somebody's back and then transitioning it into handcuffing. Um, to me, that is what's important. And even though we talk about 30 days, I even look at it your first year, this is what you're going to learn. But you're also going to roll with somebody. And I think the one thing that's tough for cops to really understand and what keeps cops staying is that they have expectations in that first year. At some point, they're going to get a heck of a lot better to where that purple belt's not able to do what he's doing anymore. I'm sorry to tell them, even in a year, you're going to roll with Matt Montgomery or Marcus Miller, and we decide today I'm still going to go 100%. Even though you're training for a year, I'm going to submit you probably 10 times. Matt's going to submit you 10 times, and I'm going to get creative how I just submitted you, and I'm going to do the same submission, but just a hair different the next time. And it's going to be demoralizing. So you got to be able to make sure that they keep coming back because at cops we don't want to be put in a bad situation and not have a winning scenario. So you got to be able to create an
Yeah.
environment to where they can have that winning scenario. If it is rolling with somebody like you or I, and you know what, they didn't get a submission, but they just got a guard pass, or they just they got a guard pass, or they were able to recover from side control. To me, as a white belt, that is the most important thing to learn is I might not be able to submit you, but I could put myself in a better position where I could put frames in front of you to where I can either find a better solution to protect myself or I can overcome and become the person on top.
That's kinda so, when Jeffers and I first started working with the new guys before class, a couple times a week, I think it was probably a good maybe 8 or 9 months before we taught any of them a submission.
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah.
was positional, sweeps, in guard open, you know, inside knee pass, a low guard break, a standing guard break, the, couple different mount escapes, but none of it was submission. And I know submissions, everybody wants the submission, right?
Yeah.
They want the tap, they want that victory, so to speak. But the things that come before it are the most critical. And so and all credit to Jefferson because that was kind of
100%.
his first idea is let's not do submissions. We're going to teach them this first stuff. Um,
And that's what
so
gets me
Mark,
when I roll with people, and that's usually the one thing that gives me the most issues is somebody that is very fundamentally sound in the basics. And even though being a brown belt, and I do a lot more sport jujitsu now than the traditional Gracie jujitsu. But if they have the basics of Gracie jujitsu and they're able to still pass a brown belt's guard just because of those basics and honing in those basics. So
amen. Good stuff. Well, Marcus, I could probably talk to you for another hour and a half and we could do a Joe
yeah,
Rogan length podcast. But what we'll do is I'd love to have you on again sometime.
yeah,
I
I enjoyed it.
appreciate you coming out. I appreciate you spending the time and taking the time to get onto this podcast with me. Um, I'll make it up to an open mat soon. I hope you can come and maybe visit us at some point and hit an open mat
Absolutely.
with me, and we'll get that cross training in. And I
100%,
need to
brother.
learn some more. Um,
Yeah.
but again, I appreciate
Fantastic
it,
podcast.
ladies and Marcus. Thank you for the work you do, and I can't wait to watch you get your black belt.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So that's going to finish this up with the Still Rolling BJJ podcast. You can check the podcast out anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it's Amazon, Spotify, YouTube. Do me a favor if you're listening, please subscribe to the feed, like it, leave a review. That's going to help my algorithm maybe get this message out to more people, and we'll grow this thing up. So thanks again, and have a nice day.